Robinson Crusoe, adapted for English language learners at level A2 by Story Steps. Chapter 1. Dreams of the Sea. My name is Robinson Crusoe. I was born in the city of York, in the north of England, in 1632. My father was from Germany and had come to England many years before. He worked in business and wanted a calm, honest life. My mother was English, kind and careful. We lived in a strong brick house on a quiet street near the river. My father always said that peace and safety were life's greatest treasures. From the time I was little, he talked to me about the middle way. He said, "A man should not be poor, but he should not try to become rich either. The middle life is best. It is steady, healthy, and loved by God." He wanted me to study law and stay near home. My mother agreed. "Your father is right, Robinson. The sea brings nothing but danger." But I was not like them. While other boys studied or played in the yard, I walked down to the harbour. I watched the big ships moving slowly on the river. I loved the sound of ropes moving and waves slapping against the wood. The smell of salt filled the air. Sailors called to one another, their voices rough but full of life. They told stories of foreign lands, shining parrots, and wild storms. Every story made me dream more strongly about the world beyond York. Sometimes my father came with me and pointed at the ships. "Those men risk everything for gold," he said. "Many will never see their families again. Promise me, Robinson, you will never go to sea." I nodded politely, but I could already hear the sea whispering in my heart. When I turned 19, my father became ill and stayed in bed for many weeks. One evening he called me to him. "My son," he said softly, "you are restless, but listen to me. The sea is not for you. It takes good men and never gives them back. Stay where life is safe." His words touched me deeply, and I promised to obey. For a time, I tried. Yet every day I walked by the port of Hull. Traders shouted, children played near the boxes, gulls circled overhead. The river flowed out to the wide ocean, and I longed to follow it. At home, I could think of nothing else. My mother noticed and said, "Robinson, danger waits behind every wave." I smiled and said nothing. One day I met a friend whose father owned a small ship. "We sail for London tomorrow," he told me. "Come with us. The trip is short and easy. You can see what the sea is really like." That night I could not sleep. The wind outside sounded like the sea calling my name. If I do not go now, I will regret it forever, I thought. Before sunrise, I packed a small bag with a shirt, some bread, and a few coins. My hands were shaking as I stepped quietly out of the house. The morning air was cold and smelled of rain. I walked quickly through the empty streets until I reached the harbour. The ship waited, rocking gently in the grey light. My friend waved from the deck. "You are just in time." When the ship left the river and reached the open sea, I felt free for the first time in my life. The wind blew in my hair, and the water shone under the sun. Gulls cried above us, and the land slowly disappeared behind the waves. My heart beat fast with joy and fear. At first the sea was calm. The sailors laughed, smoked their pipes, and sang rough songs. They showed me how to tie knots and pull ropes. I tried to copy them and felt proud when I managed a good knot. I thought, this is the life I was born for. But the next day, everything changed. The sky turned dark and heavy. The wind blew stronger and stronger until the sails pulled tight and the ship leaned to one side. The captain shouted orders. The men ran, closing sails and tying ropes, their voices lost in the roar of the sea. The waves grew high and cold. Water crashed across the deck. I grabbed a rope with both hands, shaking with fear. My stomach turned and my head spun. The ship rose on a mountain of water and dropped again with a crash. I thought of my father's words, "The sea will take your soul." I believed I would die. For the first time in my life, I prayed aloud. "Oh God, if you save me, I will go home. I will never go to sea again." The storm lasted through the night. Slowly, the wind grew weaker and the rain stopped. The sun broke through the clouds and the sea became calm again. The sailors laughed and drank rum. "It was only a small storm," one said, but I was white and shaking. That evening, the captain looked at me kindly. "First time at sea, eh? You'll learn." I nodded but said nothing. My legs were weak, and I wanted only to sleep. When I woke the next morning, the sun was shining, and the sea was bright blue. I felt ashamed of my fear. Am I a coward? Someone who is always afraid? I asked myself. Sailors face this every week. I must be brave. My promise to God began to fade. By the time we reached London, I had almost forgotten the storm. The city amazed me. The streets were full of noise and people. Horses pulled carts, bells rang, traders shouted their prices. I saw shops selling maps, spices, and strange fruits from the far countries. I watched sailors unload goods from Africa and the Caribbean. Everywhere there was movement and adventure. In the evenings I sat by the river, watching ships prepare to sail. I talked with sailors who told me about Africa and the gold trade. Their stories filled me with excitement again. One night in a tavern near the port, I met a sea captain preparing a voyage to Africa. He liked my questions and said, "Come with me, Crusoe. You will learn trade and see the world. We will bring goods home and make a fortune." I hesitated. I thought of my parents, perhaps sitting by the fire in York and wondering where I was. Then I remembered the smell of salt, the sound of waves, and the shining horizon. "Yes," I said, "I will go." That night, as I walked along the quiet river, the water shone silver in the moonlight. Far away, a gull cried. I looked up at the stars and whispered, "This is my beginning." I did not know that this choice would change my life forever, that I would face storms, slavery, and years of loneliness on a distant island. But that night, I felt only joy and hope. The sea was calling, and I was ready to follow. Chapter 2: Slave and Escape. We sailed from London and crossed the wide ocean. The wind was good, and the journey went well. The sea seemed calm and friendly. I learned quickly how to control the ship, tie ropes, and read the sky. The sailors were pleased with me, and the captain treated me kindly. After many weeks, we reached the coast of Guinea, in West Africa. Everything looked new and strange. The air was hot, and the people wore bright clothes. The captain traded beads, tools, and cloth for gold and other goods. I helped him with his work and watched carefully. When we returned to London months later, I sold my small share of the goods and made good money. I was proud of myself. I thought, my father was wrong. The sea is not so dangerous after all. Soon I found another ship sailing for Africa. The first captain could not go again, but he introduced me to a friend who needed help. "This voyage will be even better," the man said. I believed him. For some weeks everything went well. The sky was blue and the sea shone like glass. But one morning we saw a strange ship on the horizon. It came closer, moving fast. The captain looked through his glass and cried, "Pirates! Pirates from Morocco!" The pirates fired their guns. The sound shook the air. We tried to escape, but their ship was faster. Soon men with swords climbed aboard. We fought, but there were too many of them. Our captain was wounded. I was struck on the head and fell to the deck. When I woke, the battle was over. We had lost. The pirates took everything from the ship and made us prisoners. They sailed north along the coast and brought us to a town called Salé, a port in Morocco. There we were sold like animals. I was given to a tall man in a white robe. He took me to his house and said, "You are my slave now." For the first time, I felt that my life was finished. I had no hope. My master was a fisherman. Each day I helped him carry nets, clean fish, and fix ropes. Sometimes he went to sea in a small boat, and I stayed behind to guard the house. At night, I lay on the floor and thought of England. I missed my parents and hated myself for not listening to them. Years passed slowly. I spoke little, but I learned some of the local language. My master trusted me more and sometimes sent me fishing with 2 servants, a young boy named Jury and a man from Morocco. One hot day, my master told me, "Tomorrow we will go fishing again. Take food and water for the boat." But the next morning, he stayed on shore and said, "Go without me. Bring back fish for my dinner." I saw my chance. I looked at Jury. "If you help me escape, I will make you free," I whispered. He looked afraid, but then nodded. We pushed the small boat out to sea. The wind was light, and the waves were gentle. When we were far from the shore, the other man stood up to throw the net. Quickly I pointed my gun at him and shouted, "Go, swim to land or die." He jumped into the water and swam away. Jury and I were alone. I turned the boat toward the south. "Now, my friend," I said, "we are free." We sailed for many days along the coast. We had little food and drank water from the sea's edge when we could. At night we slept under the sail. Once a great lion came down to the shore. Its eyes shone in the dark. I fired my gun and it ran away. Another time we saw people on the beach. They waved to us, but I was afraid they might kill us or sell us again. We stayed at sea and passed quietly by. The sun was strong and our faces burned. The water ran low. I thought we would die. But on the 12th day, we saw a ship in the distance, a large one with white sails. We raised a piece of cloth to show we needed help. The ship turned toward us. When it came near, I saw a cross painted on the sail. It was a Portuguese ship. The captain shouted in a friendly voice, "Who are you?" I called back, "Englishmen, prisoners escaped from Salé." The captain sent a boat and pulled us aboard. He gave us food and water. Never had I tasted anything so good. When he heard our story, he said, "You are lucky men. The sea has been your enemy, but today it is your friend." He treated us kindly during the rest of the voyage. When we reached Brazil, he helped me sell the small boat and paid me for some goods we had saved. I wanted to keep Jury with me, but the captain offered to take the boy in his own service. He promised to teach him and make him a free man in 10 years. Jury looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "I will go, master. The captain is a good man." I agreed. I had no choice and no money. I thanked the captain for his kindness. He smiled and said, "You will do well here, Mr. Crusoe. Work hard, and God may bless you yet." I was free again, but far from home. I stood on the shore of Brazil and looked at the green hills. My heart was full of questions. Would I ever see England again? Would I ever see my father's house or hear my mother's voice? The sea had brought me danger, but it had also given me life. I did not yet know that my greatest adventure was still ahead. Chapter 3. A New Life in Brazil. The Portuguese captain who rescued me was an honest man. When we reached Brazil, he treated me like a friend, not a stranger. He helped me find a small house near the town and introduced me to local planters, farmers who owned large farms. "Work hard here," he said. "The land is rich and life is peaceful." For the first time in years, I felt safe. The air was warm, the ground green all year, and the rivers full of fish. Fruit hung from the trees, and the people were kind. Many spoke a little English or Portuguese, and I learned their language quickly. With my small savings, I bought tools, seeds, and 2 servants. I cleared land outside the town and planted tobacco and sugarcane. It was hard work, but each day the plants grew taller under the hot sun. At first I had little, but I worked with all my strength. I built a hut from wood and leaves and learned how to dry tobacco and cut sugar. The other planters helped me and said, "You learn fast, Mr. Crusoe. You will soon have your own plantation." After 2 years, I began to earn money. My crops grew well, and I sold part of them in the town. I bought a cow and some chickens. Life was quiet and full of work. In the evenings, I sat outside my hut, listening to insects and the wind in the palm trees. Sometimes I thought about my past, the storm, the pirates, my time as a slave. I also thought of my father's words. "The sea brings only trouble." Yet I felt that God had saved me for something more. "Perhaps this is my reward," I said to myself. But peace did not last long. I began to feel restless again. The sea was near, and ships often came to the harbour full of goods and stories. When I heard sailors talk about new lands, I felt the old fire in my heart. One evening, a group of planters visited me. "We are sending a ship to Africa," they said. "We need someone who knows the coast and can help us trade. We will bring back slaves for our plantations. You know that trade from your earlier voyages. Will you come with us?" At first, I said no. I had a good life now and remembered the storms, the pirates, and the pain of slavery. "I have risked my life enough," I told them. But that night, I could not sleep. I thought of the adventure, the money I could make, and the open sea. By morning, I said yes. The ship was small but strong, with 12 men aboard. We carried beads, knives, and cloth to trade in Africa. The sky was clear when we sailed from Brazil. The wind filled the sails, and the water shone in the sun. I felt young and alive again. For many days, the sea was calm. The men laughed and sang. I watched dolphins play beside the ship and sometimes helped the crew with ropes. "You have a sailor's heart, Crusoe," the captain said. I smiled, proud of his words. But one evening, dark clouds rose in the west. The wind changed suddenly. The captain frowned. "A storm is coming." The next day, the sea was wild. The wind screamed in the sails, and the waves struck the ship like fists. The sky turned black. Rain poured down, and thunder rolled across the sea. The ship climbed high on one wave and dropped into another. Barrels broke loose and rolled across the deck. "Throw them overboard," shouted the captain. "Lighten the ship." The men worked fast, but nothing helped. The waves grew taller, and the wind tore the sails. I held the side of the ship, shaking with fear. "God, save me," I cried. "If I live through this, I will never go to sea again." But the storm grew worse. Suddenly, we heard a great crack. The ship had struck rocks. The sound was like a giant tree breaking in two. Water rushed in from below. "We are lost," shouted the captain. "Into the boats." The men lowered 2 small boats into the sea. The waves threw them up and down like toys. I jumped into one, my heart beating wildly. "Row!" someone shouted. "Row, or we will die!" We tried to reach land, but the wind pushed us back. Huge waves lifted us and dropped us again. The sky was black, and rain covered our faces. The boat filled with water. One man cried out, and then another. Suddenly, a wave as high as a house crashed down. The boat turned over, and I fell into the sea. The water was cold and heavy. It pulled me down. I kicked my legs and tried to swim, but I could hardly breathe. Salt water filled my mouth. This is the end, I thought. I will die here, like so many others. Moments later, another wave lifted me. I saw land, a dark line in the distance. I swam toward it, though my arms were weak. Each time I thought I would sink, another wave pushed me closer. At last my feet touched sand. I fell forward and crawled onto the beach. The sea pulled at my legs, but I pushed harder. Finally, I lay on dry ground, breathing hard. The storm still raged, but I no longer cared. I was alive. For a long time, I lay without moving. The rain fell and thunder rolled above me. My clothes were heavy and torn. I looked toward the sea. Broken wood and barrels floated in the waves. No other man was in sight. When the wind grew quiet, I sat up. My heart was full of fear and wonder. I was alone, but I was alive. "God has saved me again," I whispered. "But where am I?" All around was wild land, sand, rocks, and dark trees. I saw no houses, no lights, no people, only the endless waves breaking on the shore. I was too tired to think. I crawled under some rocks and lay down. The wind blew cold, and the sea roared like a wild animal. My body shook, but I closed my eyes. That night, I slept for the first time as a man alone on a strange island. Chapter 4. Shipwrecked and Alone. When I woke, the sun was bright above me. The storm was gone. The sky was blue, and the sea was calm again. For a moment, I did not know where I was. I remembered the night before, the waves, the crash, and my long fight to reach land. I sat up slowly. My body ached, and my clothes were still wet. Around me, the beach stretched far in both directions. The sea sparkled under the sun, and pieces of the broken ship floated near the shore. I could see barrels, planks of wood, and a small chest moving with the waves, but I saw no people. I stood and looked toward the forest. It was full of tall trees and strange birds that cried loudly. The land rose in hills behind them. I felt afraid, but also interested. I was alone on a wild island. My first thought was food and water. My stomach hurt from hunger. I walked along the beach, looking for something to eat. I found a dead fish, but it smelled bad, so I left it. Farther up the beach, I saw some fruit trees. The fruit looked like melons. I picked one and bit into it. It was sweet and cool, and I ate quickly. Next, I needed fresh water. I followed a line of trees toward the hills and soon heard running water. Between two rocks, a small stream flowed from the forest. I fell to my knees and drank. The water was clear and cold. I washed my face and thanked God aloud for saving my life. After drinking, I climbed a small hill to see what lay around me. From the top, I saw the island clearly. It was large and green, surrounded by bright water. To the east and west were cliffs. To the south stretched a thick forest. The beach where I had slept curved like a half moon. Far out to sea, I saw the wreck of our ship caught on a sandbank. The broken masts stood like fingers above the water. My heart jumped. "There are supplies there," I said. "If I can reach the ship, I can live." I waited for the tide, the water, to go out. When the water pulled away, the sandbank looked closer. I found a long piece of wood and used it as a paddle. I tied my coat to it like a small sail and pushed myself into the water, using a plank as a raft. The sea was calm that morning, and the current carried me toward the ship. When I reached it, I climbed up using a loose rope. The deck was wet and leaning to one side, but part of the ship was still strong. I went below and found food, cheese, bread, and a little wine. I ate some at once. After eating, I searched for things I could take back to shore. I found tools, a hammer, an axe, nails, and 2 saws. I also found clothes, a few knives, and 3 guns with powder and bullets. I filled a small bag with biscuits and dried meat. Next, I thought about how to carry everything. The ship's boat was gone, but there were empty barrels and planks. I tied them together with rope to make a flat raft. It floated well when I pushed it into the water. One by one, I carried my treasures onto the raft. Food in one corner, tools in another, and the guns in the middle. It was heavy, but strong. The sea was calm, and the wind blew gently toward the beach. Slowly, I paddled back. Several times I thought I would fall, but after an hour, I reached the shore. When I stood on the sand with all those things, I felt rich. I laughed aloud. "Men at home do not know how lucky they are," I said. "Here, a loaf of bread is worth gold." I carried the items piece by piece toward the trees until I found a dry place under some rocks. I laid them out and covered them with branches in case of rain. Afterward, I sat down and looked at the sea. The ship still stood on the sandbank. Tomorrow, I thought, I will go again. That night, I made a small fire using dry wood and a spark from my gunpowder. The flames warmed me. I ate bread and meat, then lay beside the fire. Above me, the stars shone brightly. I thought of my father and mother in York, of their quiet house, and of my foolishness. Tears filled my eyes. "God has punished me," I whispered, "but he has also saved me." The forest was full of strange noises, birds crying, leaves moving, animals walking, but I was too tired to be afraid. I slept deeply beside the fire. In the morning I woke early and thanked God for another day. The sea was calm again, and the sun was bright. I ate a little bread, drank from the stream, and went back to the shore. The wreck was still there. I decided to build a better raft to bring back more things. I used stronger planks and tied them with rope in a square. It took many hours, but when I finished, it could carry much more. I returned to the ship and searched again. This time, I found a chest full of tools, more food, and several bottles of rum. In another part, I discovered a small bag of coins and gold pieces. I laughed. "What use is money here?" I said. "I would rather have bread." Still, I took it. By evening, I returned safely with another load. I carried everything to my hiding place under the rocks. I made a rough shelter of branches and leaves nearby and covered the ground with dry grass to sleep on. When the fire burned that night, I felt safer. I now had food, water, clothes, and tools. "I can live," I said. "God has not left me." Before sleeping, I looked once more toward the sea. The ship was lower in the water. I knew soon it would disappear forever. "Tomorrow," I whispered. "One last trip." At last, I lay beside my fire and closed my eyes, tired but full of hope. Chapter 5. Building a Home. The next morning, the sea was calm and the sun bright. From the beach, I could still see the broken ship on the sandbank. The tide was low, and I knew it might soon sink. "One last trip," I said. "I must take what I can before it is gone." I built a stronger raft, tying planks tightly together. After that, I waited for the tide to rise and pushed into the water. The sea was quiet, and the wind carried me easily. When I reached the ship, I climbed aboard for the final time. The inside was full of water now, and the smell of salt and rot filled the air. Still, I searched carefully. In one room I found boxes of nails, a small barrel of gunpowder, and tools I had missed before. In another, I discovered fishing lines, hooks, and rope. I also found some strong cloth, a few biscuits, and cheese. My greatest prize was a dog that had survived on the wreck. When I called softly, it wagged its tail and came to me. I lifted it into the raft. "We are both lucky," I said. When I returned to the beach, I carried everything to my hiding place. I dried the gunpowder carefully and stored it inside a cave. The dog followed me everywhere. I was glad to hear another heartbeat beside my own. After that day, the sea grew rough again. A week later, the ship broke apart in a storm and was gone forever. I watched the pieces float away, feeling thankful I had saved so much. I now had food, water, clothes, tools, and guns, but I needed a real home. I could not sleep under rocks forever. I decided to build a safe place to live, part house, part store. First, I searched for the best spot. I wanted a place near fresh water and not far from the sea, but high enough to be safe from floods. After 2 days, I found a small flat area at the foot of a steep hill. Behind it was solid rock, and in front, a small open field. "This will be my home," I said aloud. I carried my things there, one load at a time. It took many days. I began to build. I cut long branches and pushed them deep into the ground in a half circle. Between them, I put smaller sticks to make a wall. It was hard work, but I did not stop. When the wall was finished, I covered it with leaves and grass. It looked rough, but it kept out wind and rain. To make myself safer, I built a fence in front of the wall with sharp-pointed sticks. I left only one small opening, which I closed at night with a heavy plank. Inside, I placed my tools and food. I made a bed of dry grass and covered it with clothes from the ship. I set up a table and stool from flat pieces of wood. Slowly, my house began to look like a real home. One morning, I saw a small cave in the rock behind my house. I made the entrance wider and went inside. It was cool and dry, perfect for storing food and gunpowder. I brought all my supplies there. The cave became my storeroom, and the fenced area outside was my living space. Each day, I worked on something new. I built shelves for tools and guns, and a place to hang my clothes. I dug a small hole in the ground to keep things cool. When I looked around at night, I felt proud. I have a house, a cave, and a fence, I said. I am no longer lost. I am living. But work never ended. I needed firewood every day, and I had to hunt for food. I went to the forest with my gun and found wild goats. The first shot missed, but the second brought one down. I thanked God and carried it home. I used its skin for a mat and saved the meat for many days. Sometimes I roasted meat over the fire. Other times I dried it in the sun so it would last longer. The smell of cooking filled the air, and I began to feel less afraid of hunger. The dog sat beside me, waiting for his share. He was my companion and my guard. When he barked at night, I knew danger was near. Still, nights were often hard. Strange sounds came from the forest, cries, footsteps, and moving leaves. Once, something large moved near the fence. My heart beat fast. I held my gun and waited. In the morning, I saw only goat tracks. I laughed and said, "You frightened me, my friend." Each day, I thanked God for my safety. I began to speak aloud often, just to hear a voice. "Today, I will fix the roof," I would say, or "Tomorrow, I will build a shelf." It made the silence easier to bear. When I felt lonely, I climbed the hill behind my house. From the top, I could see the whole island, the beach, the forest, and the endless sea. I looked for ships every day, but none appeared. The horizon was empty. Still, I made a habit of checking. Hope kept me alive. Weeks passed. My hands grew hard from work, and my skin turned brown from the sun. I learned which fruits were safe to eat and which made me sick. I learned how to make fire faster, using a spark from the gunpowder and dry grass. I even began to plan a small garden near my fence. When heavy rain came, I stayed inside, listening to the drops fall on the roof. Sometimes I read from the Bible I had found on the ship. The words gave me peace. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," I read aloud. I felt that God was truly with me. One evening, as I sat by the fire, I thought of my father. I saw his serious face and heard his voice. "Stay home, Robinson. The sea is dangerous." I had not listened, and yet here I was, alive. I whispered, "Father, I was foolish, but I am learning." I looked around at my house, my tools, and my fire. I was alone, but not helpless. I had built a life with my own hands. The waves roared in the distance, and the forest whispered in the dark. I closed my eyes and said softly, "I will live here. I will not give up." Chapter 6. Learning to Farm. Weeks turned into months, and I began to understand the rhythm of life on the island. Each morning, I rose with the sun, fed my fire, drank from the stream, and thanked God for keeping me alive. My home was safe and dry, but food still worried me. The fruit near my house grew less, and I could not always hunt a goat. I needed something more lasting. One hot morning, I was sorting the bags of food I had taken from the ship. Some were old and broken, and dry grain had spilled onto the ground. I swept it into a corner and forgot it. A few weeks later, when I cleaned again, I saw small green shoots growing there. I bent down, surprised. The plants looked like wheat. I touched them carefully. "The grain from the ship," I whispered. "It has grown." I had never been a farmer, but I knew this was a gift. If these few seeds could grow, maybe I could plant more. I decided to try. I collected every bit of grain I could find and dried it carefully. Afterward, I chose a sunny piece of land not far from my house. The ground was hard, so I broke it with my shovel and cleared away stones. I pressed each seed gently into the soil. "Grow well," I said aloud. Every morning I went to check the field. For a long time, nothing happened. I began to fear the seeds were dead. But after many days, small green leaves pushed through the earth. My heart filled with joy. "I am a farmer now," I said proudly. The plants grew taller each week, but soon birds came and began to eat the young shoots. I waved my arms and shouted, but they only flew away for a moment and came back. Angry, I built a fence around the field from sticks and rope. Later, I made a small scarecrow, a figure that looks like a person, from old clothes. It worked for a while, but clever birds still found their way inside. I learned to be patient and watchful. Months passed, and the plants grew golden in the sun. When I looked closely at the tops, I saw dry grains. I had wheat. I laughed and thanked God. I cut the plants carefully and carried them home in bundles. I laid them out to dry and then tried to make flour. At first, I crushed the grains between stones, but they jumped away. I tried again, pressing harder. Soon I had a small pile of powder. It was not much, but it was enough to bake bread. I mixed the flour with water and cooked it on a flat stone over the fire. The bread was heavy and rough, but when I tasted it, I nearly cried. "This is mine," I said aloud. "My own bread." Each bite filled me with strength and pride. I thought of my father's table in York and how simple bread had been there. Here, it was a miracle. I decided to plant more the next season. I built better fences and cleared a larger space. I worked from sunrise to sunset, sweating in the heat, but I did not stop. When the next rain came, the soil grew rich and the new shoots appeared stronger. I kept some seeds aside for the next year. Slowly, I began to think like a farmer. But life was not all work. The days were long, and loneliness often returned. I spoke to the dog, to the fire, even to the goats I saw on the rocks. One morning, I decided to try catching a young goat alive. I built a simple trap with rope and branches near the stream. For many days, nothing happened. One morning, I heard frightened cries. I ran and found a small goat caught by its leg. It pulled hard, but I calmed it and untied the rope. I carried it home. At first, the goat kicked and tried to run. I tied it gently inside my fence and gave it water and fruit. For 2 days, it cried loudly. Then it grew quieter and began to eat. I built a small pen from sticks beside my cave. Soon, the goat followed me when I brought food. I laughed. "You and I will be friends," I said. Weeks later, I caught another goat, and then a third. I now had a small herd. I gave them grass and fresh water every morning. The dog guarded them when I worked. One day the first goat gave milk. I had never milked an animal before, and most of it spilled on the ground. The next day, I tried again and filled a small pot. The milk was warm and sweet. I drank slowly, smiling. "Now I have milk and bread," I said. "I will not starve." As the months passed, I learned many things. I dried fruit in the sun to keep it longer. I smoked meat over the fire. I built clay pots to hold water and milk. They often cracked at first, but after many tries, some became strong. I even made a few candles from goat fat so I could see inside the cave at night. Sometimes I sat outside watching the sunset over the sea. I thought of England and my family. I wondered if they believed I was dead. I missed them deeply, yet I also felt proud. I had learned to live with my own hands. The island no longer felt only like a prison. It was becoming my home. Still, I prayed every night that one day a ship would come. I never stopped looking at the horizon, but I also thanked God for what I had. I was foolish, I said, but you have shown me mercy. That evening, I sat by the fire with my dog at my side and a piece of bread in my hand. I looked at my goats in the pen and the green field beyond. The stars shone above, and the air was soft. I whispered, I was once a lost man. Now I am a farmer on my own island. At the end of the day, I ate my bread slowly, full of peace. Chapter 7. Years of Solitude. Years passed slowly on the island. I marked every day with a cut on a piece of wood. 7 cuts made a week, and I drew a longer line for Sunday. It helped me remember time. My beard grew long, my skin turned dark from the sun, and my clothes became old and torn. I fixed them with pieces of goat skin and learned to make thread from thin plant pieces. I was no longer the young man who had left home. My house and fields became strong and neat. The goats gave me milk every morning, and I made cheese by pressing it in cloth near the fire. My wheat grew well, and I always kept extra seeds. I learned to plant at the right season and to store food for months. I built better pots from clay, fired them in my own oven, and used them to hold grain. My tools were worn, but I fixed them again and again. I had everything I needed, except people. Loneliness was my hardest enemy. Each evening, when the sun went down, I sat by the fire and spoke to myself or to the dog. Well, Crusoe, I said aloud, you are king of this island, but a poor king without people. The dog listened, wagging its tail, but could not answer. Sometimes I felt peace, sometimes deep sadness. When I felt lost, I turned to the Bible I had found on the ship. I read slowly, often aloud. The words gave me comfort. One verse said, "Call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver thee." I repeated it many times. I began to see that my time on the island was not only punishment, but also a lesson. I prayed each day, asking for strength and thanking God for life. One morning, the ground shook under me. My house shook, and the roof nearly fell. It was an earthquake. I ran outside, shouting in fear. The hill behind me cracked, and stones rolled down. The sea moved wildly, even though there was no wind. I fell to my knees and prayed until it stopped. For days afterward, I was afraid to sleep inside. I built a small tent outside my fence and stayed there until I felt safe again. Another time, a great storm came from the sea. Lightning flashed, thunder rolled, and rain poured for hours. My roof leaked, and the fire went out. But when the morning came, the air was clean and bright, and I thanked God that my home still stood. After that, I made the roof thicker and built channels for the water. Every danger taught me something new. Years turned into more years. I kept careful record of time and worked harder than ever. My small garden grew larger. I planted new kinds of fruit from seeds I found. The goats had babies, and I built a larger pen for them. I had more than 20 now. I became good at milking, and the milk gave me butter and cheese. My bread became lighter as I learned better ways to grind the flour. Still, there were lonely days. On my birthday, I sat by the fire and remembered my family. I wondered if my parents were alive, or if they thought of their foolish son. Would they forgive me? I asked aloud. My voice sounded strange in the quiet air. Sometimes tears came, but I wiped them quickly. Courage, Crusoe, I said. You have lived this long. You will live again tomorrow. To keep busy, I explored the island. I climbed the highest hill and saw the sea stretch in all directions. I found new streams, fruit trees, and caves. In one cave, I saw bones and shells of old animals, but no people. I made a map in my mind and named the places: the Valley of the Goats, the River of Fresh Water, and Mount Hope. Naming them made me feel less alone. Once, I built a small boat from a tree I cut down. It took months of work to shape it with my axe. When I finished, I was proud. But when I tried to move it to the water, I realized it was too heavy. I had built it far from the shore. I laughed bitterly. Crusoe, you are clever, but not wise, I said. Still, the mistake taught me patience. I later made a smaller canoe that I could carry, though I dared not sail far. My days had order: morning for work, afternoon for rest, evening for reading and prayer. Sometimes I sang old songs softly to myself. The sound of my own voice felt warm and human. I even talked to the goats as if they were friends. Good morning, I told them each day. You are my people now. One night, I dreamed that a ship had come. In my dream, I saw men on the beach calling my name. I ran to them, crying for joy. But when I woke, there was only the sound of the waves. My heart was heavy, but I whispered, one day, perhaps. I often looked out to sea. Each time the wind blew, I hoped to see a sail. But year after year, the horizon stayed empty. I began to accept that no one might ever come. Yet strangely, I no longer felt so afraid. I had built a life here. I was strong, healthy, and at peace. Sometimes I thought about sin and forgiveness. Perhaps, I said, this island is my second chance. God has saved me to learn patience, faith, and to be thankful. I looked around at my home, my field, and my goats. This is my world now, I whispered. The years went on, and I lost count of them. I had everything a man could make for himself: food, shelter, safety. But still I longed for another human voice. I prayed not only for rescue, but also for understanding. I began to believe that if help came, it would come when I was ready. One afternoon, as I walked along the beach, I saw something that stopped my heart. In the sand before me was the clear mark of a human foot. Chapter 8. The Footprint. For many years, I had lived peacefully on the island. Each day was the same. I cared for my goats, worked in my fields, and prayed by the fire. The island had become my world, and I thought I knew every part of it. But that one day, everything changed. In the sand, not far from me, was a single footprint. It was deep and clear, with toes and a heel pressed into the wet ground. My heart jumped. I looked around quickly. The beach was empty. The trees were still. But the footprint was real. I knelt down and touched it. It was larger than my own foot, made by a bare human. I felt cold even though the sun was hot. Someone is here, I whispered. I am not alone. Fear rushed through me. For years I had wished to see another person. I had dreamed of rescue and prayed for company. Yet now that I had proof, I was terrified. What if the man was dangerous? What if he came to kill me? My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. I ran back to my house, looking behind me every few steps. When I reached the fence, I shut the gate and climbed inside. My hands shook so much I could hardly hold my gun. I loaded it, then the second gun, and placed them near the door. My home, once safe, now seemed too open. I whispered, they could be anywhere. That night I did not sleep. Every sound made me jump. The cry of a bird, the wind in the trees, even the waves. I imagined men creeping through the forest. My dog barked once and I almost fired my gun in fear. The hours passed slowly until morning. When the sun rose, I climbed the hill above my house and looked in every direction. I saw no one. Still, I could not rest. I decided to make my home stronger. For days I worked without stopping. I built the fence higher and thicker, adding new pointed sticks and branches. I even dug a hole in the hill behind the cave to make a secret tunnel where I could hide. Inside, I stored food, water, and powder. If danger came, I would be ready. When everything was safe again, I forced myself to go back to the beach. The sand looked the same, but when I reached the place, the footprint was gone. The tide had washed it away. I searched for more, walking far in both directions, but found none. Still, I could not stop thinking about it. One print was enough to change everything. For many weeks I lived in fear. I went out only in the middle of the day when the light was bright. I moved quietly and stayed near the trees. Sometimes I thought I saw shadows among the rocks, but when I looked again, they were gone. I began to doubt myself. Maybe it was my own footprint, I said. I tried to believe it, but I could not. The shape had been too large, too clear. One night, as I sat by the fire, I thought about all the years I had spent alone. I had prayed for rescue, but perhaps God had sent this as a test, to see if I trusted him. I prayed again, asking for courage. Slowly, my heart grew calmer. After some time, I wanted to know more. I started to explore again, more carefully than before. I followed the coast far to the west and saw strange marks on the ground, ashes, bones, and pieces of burnt wood. I realized with horror that people had been here, cooking meat, and not animal meat, human bones. I froze. Cannibals, I whispered. There are dangerous men on this island. I backed away, terrified. I climbed the nearest hill and looked out to sea. There was nothing, only the blue water and the distant horizon. I understood now. The people must come by boat from another island. Maybe they came only sometimes, to eat and leave again. But when would they come next? I hurried home and worked harder than ever to make my place safe. I built traps and sharpened sticks. I hid my goats in a valley farther from the beach so no one could find them. I moved carefully, leaving no footprints near my house. I practiced shooting my guns and counted the bullets. I told myself I would fight if I had to, but I hoped I would never see them. For months, nothing happened. I began to relax, though the fear never fully left me. Sometimes at night I thought I heard voices in the wind or saw faint lights far away. My dog growled at the darkness, and I sat with my gun beside the fire until morning. One evening, as I looked across the sea, I felt something new. Not only fear, but also loneliness. I thought of the men who might come, wild and cruel as they were, and realized that even they were part of the world I had lost. I have lived here so long, I whispered, that even danger feels like company. Still, I prayed to stay safe. Lord, I said, If you send people here, let them be kind, and if they are not, protect me. I had survived storms, sickness, and years alone. Now I faced a new test, the fear of men I had never met. The next day, I stood on the hill with my gun and looked out to sea. The sky was wide and empty. The waves broke softly on the shore. I felt the wind on my face and said aloud, I will not run from this island. It is my home. I turned toward my house, calm but watchful. I knew that somewhere beyond the horizon were men who might return, and I knew that if they did, my life on the island would never be the same again. Chapter 9, Friday. That winter, my old dog died. I buried him near the cave and missed his faithful watch. I had found him on the wreck years before, and he had been my faithful companion. Now I was truly alone. For a long time after I found the footprint, I lived quietly. I hid my fire at night and walked only during the day. Many months passed, and nothing happened. Slowly, I began to walk farther again. I hunted, fixed my fence, and watched the sea. I told myself the people might never return. One morning, from the top of the hill, I saw smoke rising from the far side of the island. The wind carried a faint smell of fire. My heart beat fast. They are here, I whispered. I took my guns and moved through the forest until I reached a rock above the beach. Below me were 20 or more wild men, painted and dancing around a fire. 2 canoes lay on the sand. I saw 3 prisoners tied near the fire. I understood at once. They were cannibals. I had feared this moment, and now it was real. I watched in horror as they danced and sang. Then one prisoner broke free and ran toward the forest. The others shouted and chased him. The man ran straight toward me. He was young and strong, but terrified. 2 of the cannibals followed close behind. I raised my gun, took aim, and fired. 1 fell at once. I fired again, and the second dropped. The others stopped and stared at the noise. The man reached me, gasping for breath. He knelt and placed my foot on his head, showing thanks and respect. More of the cannibals ran toward us. I shot one with my other gun, and the young man grabbed a sword from the ground and struck another. The rest turned, shouting in fear, and ran to their canoes. In minutes, they were gone. The beach was empty except for the dead and the fire. I led the young man through the forest to a safe place. I gave him bread and water. He ate slowly and pointed to the sky as if to thank me. I pointed to myself and said, Robinson. Then I pointed to him and asked, Name? He spoke a word I did not know. I smiled and said, Friday, because I had saved him on a Friday. He repeated the name proudly. From that day, he was called Friday. Friday was about 25 years old, tall, strong, and quick. His face was kind and smart. Though his skin was dark, his smile was bright and warm. I felt joy in my heart. After all my years alone, I had a friend. When we reached my home, I showed him the fence, the cave, and the fire. He looked around with wonder. I gave him more food and showed him how to rest on my bed of leaves. He smiled, said a few words, and soon fell asleep. I sat beside him and watched the firelight on his face. Thank you, God, I whispered. You have sent me a friend. In the following days, I taught Friday simple English words. Bread, water, fire, yes, and no. I pointed to myself and said, Master, but he often called me friend. He helped me milk the goats, carry wood, and grind grain. He built a small hut beside my cave. When I taught him to use a gun, he was first afraid of the sound, but later he became a fine hunter. He brought back birds and goats, proud of his work. At night, we sat by the fire. I taught him about God and the Bible. He listened carefully, asked questions, and said, "Good, God good." He prayed with me, and I saw peace grow in his heart. I thanked God for giving me such a faithful companion. One morning, Friday told me in his new English that his people sometimes came to this island in canoes. They fought enemies and sometimes ate them after. His words made me shiver. He added something that surprised me. One of the prisoners that day was his father. I was shocked. "Your father?" I asked. He nodded sadly. "Maybe alive?" He said he did not know. I promised to help him if I could. Weeks later, from the hill, we saw smoke again on the same beach. Friday cried out, "They come! Maybe father!" We took our guns and crept through the trees toward the shore. There were canoes again and men around a fire. 2 prisoners stood nearby, one old, one white. "Father!" Friday whispered. "And white man! Spanish!" We planned quickly. When half of the group walked toward the boats, we ran behind the rocks and fired. 2 fell at once. Friday rushed forward and cut the ropes from his father's hands. The old man fell into his arms. I ran to the white man, who was weak but alive. I helped him stand. Together we moved back into the forest as the others shouted in fear. Friday fired his gun, and the rest ran to their canoes. Soon the beach was empty again. Friday's father spoke in a soft voice I did not understand, but his eyes were full of kindness. The Spanish man thanked us again and again. "Señor," he said, "you built a small kingdom here." I laughed. "A lonely kingdom," I answered. After they rested, the Spaniard told us his story. He had been shipwrecked with other men on the mainland. Some of them were still alive but trapped by the natives. He said, "We shall go back and rescue them. Then we will all help you build a large boat to escape this island." My heart filled with hope. Maybe God was finally opening the way home. We agreed on the plan. The Spaniard and Friday's father would sail back to the mainland in the canoe, rescue the other survivors, and bring them here. Then we would all work together to build a boat big enough to reach England. For weeks we prepared for their journey. We baked bread, dried meat, and stored powder. The Spaniard and Friday's father repaired the canoe and packed supplies. The morning they left, Friday stood beside me, holding my hand tightly. His father had only just returned, and now he was leaving again. "They come back," I said. "God will help them." Friday nodded, though his eyes were wet. We watched from the hill as the canoe crossed the water toward the mainland. After they left, Friday and I returned to our work. He told me about his island, and I told him about England, my home, and the sea. We were very different, but we understood each other. I had saved Friday's life, but he had also saved mine. The sea no longer looked like a prison. It looked like a road home. Chapter 10: Rescue. Many months passed after Friday's father and the Spaniard left in their canoe. Each morning, Friday climbed the hill and looked toward the sea. "Not yet," he said softly. I too watched the horizon, half afraid, half hopeful. One bright afternoon, Friday shouted, "Canoe! Canoe!" We ran to the shore. Out on the blue water, a small boat moved toward us. My heart jumped. They had returned. When they landed, Friday ran to his father and hugged him. The Spaniard smiled and lifted his hands in greeting. Behind them were 3 more men, 2 Spanish sailors and 1 dark-skinned man from the mainland. They were thin but alive. They had escaped from their enemies and brought tools, food and powder. My little island no longer felt empty. For the first time in many years there was laughter and many voices around my fire. The Spaniard thanked me again. "Señor Crusoe," he said, "we have spoken of your plan. We are ready to build a great boat. With God's help, we can all leave this island." His words filled me with joy. Every man began to work. We cut trees, shaped planks, and dried them in the sun. Friday was strong and cheerful. The Spaniards were clever and patient. After weeks of work, we had the beginnings of a fine boat. One evening, as the sun went down, we heard a sound that froze our hearts. A gunshot from the sea. We ran to the hill and looked out. There, just beyond the reef, was a large ship. "An English ship," I cried. I had not seen one for 28 years. A small boat was leaving it and rowing toward the island. We hid behind the trees and watched. The boat landed on the beach. 11 men stepped out, 3 with weapons and 8 without. I could see at once that the armed men were the masters, and the others were prisoners. I heard angry voices. The 3 pushed the prisoners forward and shouted orders. I crept closer and listened. To my surprise, they spoke English. "Tie them up," one man said. "We'll leave them here to die." I understood then. This was a mutiny. The sailors had fought against their captain. The sailors had taken control of their ship and planned to abandon their captain and his loyal crew on my island. I turned to Friday. "We must help them," I whispered. When those sailors left the prisoners on the sand and returned to the boat, we came out of hiding. The prisoners sat sadly, thinking they were alone. I called softly, "Friends!" They jumped and looked around. "Don't be afraid," I said. "I live here. Tell me who you are." One man stood up. He was tall, with a pale face and kind eyes. "I am the captain of that ship," he said. "My own men turned against me. They mean to kill me and keep the ship." I told him I would help. His eyes filled with tears. "God has sent you to save us," he said. I gave the men food and water, and we planned. "If we can capture some of the mutineers when they return," I said, "we can take back your ship." The captain agreed. We hid behind trees near the beach and waited. The sun began to set. "They will send men to check," the captain whispered. He was right. When the boat came again, 5 mutineers stepped onto the sand. The others stayed at sea. Friday and I aimed our guns, and the captain called out, "In the name of the king, give up." The men froze in fear. 2 ran toward the trees, but Friday shot over their heads, and they dropped their weapons. We tied them and brought them to my cave. The captain spoke with anger, but also pity. "If you help us take back the ship, I will let you live." They agreed at once. Night came. The sea was quiet, and the ship lay dark against the horizon. The captain whispered, "Now or never." He, Friday, and I went down to the shore with the loyal sailors. We rowed in silence toward the ship. The stars shone above us, and the only sound was the water under our oars. When we reached the side of the ship, the captain climbed first. A guard leaned over the rail, half asleep. The captain struck him down before he could cry out. We followed quickly. In moments, we were on deck. A fight began, short and wild. There were shouts, blows, and gunfire. Friday fought bravely, and the loyal sailors defeated the rest. Soon the ship was ours again. When the sun rose, the English flag flew once more. The captain turned to me with tears in his eyes. "Mr. Crusoe," he said, "the ship is yours as much as mine. You have saved my life." I smiled. "No," I said. "God saved us all." We went back to the island for the others, Friday's father, the Spaniards, and the rescued men. They wept with joy when they saw the ship. I walked slowly to the beach and looked at the water. For 28 years, I had dreamed of this moment. I thought of my old home in York, of my father and mother, and of the long road that had brought me here. Before we sailed, I looked around my island one last time. I saw my fence, my cave, my fields, and the goats feeding in the grass. It had been my prison, my school, and my home. "Farewell," I said softly. "You taught me how to live." The wind filled the sails. The island grew smaller and smaller behind us. Friday stood beside me, smiling but quiet. "You are free now," I said. He looked at me and answered, "We free." I put my hand on his shoulder. "Yes, Friday, we are free." We sailed for England, and after many weeks we reached the shore. I stepped onto the land of my birth, older, wiser, and full of thanks. The world I had left was gone, but I was alive. I had lost everything once, but I had found something greater: faith, courage, and a friend who had shared my island and my heart. Epilogue: Home Again. When I stepped again on English ground, the world felt strange to me. The streets were busy, the houses close together, the air full of voices. After so many silent years, I almost missed the wind and the waves. England was my home, but it felt new and unfamiliar, like a dream I had forgotten. I went first to the city of York, where I was born. The road was long, and many things had changed. The fields looked smaller, the towns larger. When I reached the house where my parents had lived, I stopped and looked. A new family lived there now. My mother and father had long since died. I stood at the gate for a long time and felt both sorrow and peace. I had left them without goodbye, and now only their memory remained. I whispered, "Father, you were right. The sea is dangerous, but it taught me how to live." I found some old friends who still remembered me. They listened with wide eyes as I told my story, about the storm, the island, the goats, and Friday. Some shook their heads, not sure if they should believe me. Others cried and said, "God saved you for a reason." They were right. I had been foolish once, but the island had changed me. I no longer dreamed of adventure for its own sake. I dreamed of peace. In London, I found a lawyer who helped me recover my fortune. Years before, I had owned a plantation in Brazil. When I disappeared, everyone thought I was dead. But my friends there had kept my land safe and saved the money it earned. When they learned I was alive, they sent me everything. Suddenly, I was a rich man. It felt strange to hold money again. On the island, I had learned that food, water, and a warm fire were the only true riches. Still, I was thankful. I used the money to help some poor families and to send gifts to the Spaniards who had been with me. Friday stayed close to me, quiet but happy to see new things. The streets and noise of London frightened him at first, but he learned quickly. He liked the markets and the smell of baked bread. He often said, "Many people, but few friends." I smiled because I understood. After years on the island, we both valued quiet company more than crowds. One day, I met a kind widow who helped me organize my business. She listened to my story with gentle eyes and said, You have lived many lives in one. Her words stayed with me. I began to write down my memories so that others might learn from them. I wanted people to know that courage and patience can grow even in the darkest place. Friday and I lived in England for a few years. He learned to speak English well and went to church with me. People looked at him with surprise, but he did not mind. He said, "I free man. No care what they think." His calm spirit often reminded me of my own lessons on the island. Sometimes, late at night, we sat by the fire and spoke of our old home, the cave, the goats, and the stars over the quiet sea. We both missed it, though we never said so aloud. But peace never lasts long for men who have lived too long with adventure. Ships still called to me when I saw them in the harbour. The sound of sails in the wind moved my heart. Friday, too, would sometimes look at the horizon and say softly, "Sea calling." I knew what he meant. After a few years, we joined a voyage to the east. I promised myself it would be a short one. That journey brought new troubles and dangers. We faced storms, sickness, and strange lands. But I was no longer the same man. I had learned to face every hardship with faith and reason. When others lost hope, I told them, "God saved me once on an empty island. He will save us again." And often he did. Friday stood beside me through all of it, strong and loyal as ever. Years passed. I grew older and returned to England again. Friday, my dear companion, died of illness not long after we landed. I buried him on a green hill by the sea and planted a small tree over his grave. When the wind blew through the leaves, it sounded like waves on sand. I stood there for a long time and said, "Farewell, my friend. You were my brother." After that, I lived quietly. I never married, but I cared for the children of my friends and helped travelers who were poor or lost. Sometimes young men came to me, full of dreams about adventure. They asked, "Should I go to sea?" I smiled and said, "The sea can teach you much, but it will take more than it gives. Be sure your heart is ready." In my old age, I often thought of my island. In my mind, I saw the fields of grain, the goats near the cave, the footprints on the sand, and the fire burning at night. I no longer feared storms or being alone. The island had been my teacher. It had taught me faith when I was hopeless, work when I was weak, and peace when I was alone. Sometimes in dreams, I walk again on that beach. The sun shines, the air smells of salt, and Friday walks beside me, smiling. I hear the sound of the waves and wake with tears, but not of sorrow, of thanks. Life had given me more than I deserved. I had been lost and found again. Now, as I grow near the end of my days, I write these words for those who will come after me. Let them know that courage, patience, and faith can build a home anywhere, even on a lonely island. The sea may take you far from everything you know, but it can also bring you back to yourself. And if you ever find yourself alone, remember, no man is truly alone who walks with God.